The mahogany-paneled room smelled like lemon polish and quiet betrayal. I sat near the end of the long table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, watching the scene unfold like I wasn't in it. The air conditioning hummed. The Hallbergs did what they did best, performed. Melina beamed, dabbing her eyes with a monogram tissue as the lawyer slid the crisp envelope across the table toward her. She gasped at the amount, $12 million, as if she hadn't already known. My mother, Lysandra, clapped softly, her rings clinking like glass. My father, Regis, gave a solemn nod, as if proud of a war medal being bestowed. It was all so rehearsed, so familiar, like a family dinner where the menu never changed and I was always allergic to the main course. I sat very still as Mr. Rowden's voice shifted toward me. And to Soraya Hallberg. Lysandra turned toward me, her smile narrowing. "You're smart," she said, her tone syrupy. "Go make your own." Melina let out a tiny high-pitched laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Regis didn't look at me at all. I didn't flinch. I just blinked slowly and nodded once, like I was hearing a weather forecast. But then, Mr. Rowden hesitated. He reached back into his leather briefcase and pulled out a smaller yellowed envelope. It looked old, personal. My breath caught before I even saw the handwriting. This, he said carefully, was given to me under separate instruction. From Mr. Arno Hallberg, to be opened by Soraya Hallberg at the cabin, alone. The room shifted. Lysandra's eyes darted to Regis, her fingers curling around the armrest. Melina's mouth opened, then shut. Regis leaned forward, jaw tight. "The cabin," he repeated. I took the envelope gently from the lawyer's hand. It was addressed in Grandpa Arno's unmistakable scrawl, bold, slanted, unapologetic. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. For once, the Hallbergs were out of script. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket without unfolding it. My fingers trembled just once, then steadied. I stood. Mr. Rowden cleared his throat. "The contents are not to be disclosed or shared until Soraya has read them in private as per Mr. Hallberg's wishes." I nodded, and without a word to anyone, I turned and walked out of the room. The cold October wind met me like an old friend. The car was parked where I'd left it, facing north, toward the mountains, toward the cabin. The Catskills met me in silence, the kind that settles not just around you, but inside you. The drive had been long and mostly wordless, just the wind, the engine, and the weight of that envelope in my coat pocket. I hadn't stopped once. I didn't want to give myself time to hesitate. The gravel road curved like I remembered, though the trees had crept in tighter, like they were guarding something. When the cabin finally appeared through the thicket, it looked smaller than I remembered, but somehow stronger, too. My chest tightened. They used to call it Arno's Science Shed, always with a smirk. To them it was just another oddity, another thing to tease and dismiss. But to me, it had been a sanctuary. Grandpa called it the thinking house. I hadn't been back since his funeral. I unlocked the door. The hinges groaned in protest. Dust floated in long slants of afternoon light. Everything was still where it had always been, his faded workbench, the old wood stove, the cracked window panes that rattled in strong winds. It smelled like cedar and solder. I placed the envelope on the table and opened it with steady hands. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a hand-drawn map. The map was unmistakable. His style was always bold and overly detailed, like a child with too many colored pencils. At the bottom, in blue ink, check the scope box. Left panel, so-so only. My breath caught. I crossed the room to the corner shelves. The old blue microscope kit was right where I'd left it at 13. Dusty, taped shut. I peeled it open. Inside, nestled beneath a velvet cloth, was a brass key and a small slip of paper. "You already know where it goes." I did. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I walked to the back of the cabin. Under the edge of the rug, a shallow groove. I wedged the key into the hidden lock. With a soft click, a panel lifted. Cold air rushed up from below. I climbed down into the dark. Fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing white walls, steel shelves, sealed containers, and lab equipment I hadn't seen in years. Everything smelled like possibility. And there at the far end, a drawer labeled in thick marker, So-So Property Transfer, Hallberg Bioremedy LLC. The folder was thick, sealed with a simple brass clasp. My fingers trembled as I opened it, but the moment the first page came into view, everything in me stilled. Hallberg Bioremedy LLC, incorporated, registered, a signature line, Arno H. Hallberg, and another line underneath it, sole successor, So-So Hallberg. I kept reading each document heavier than the last. The startup had been formed 5 years ago. Grandpa had quietly sold his final parcel of farmland and funneled every cent, $2.3 million, into research and infrastructure. 5 provisional patents were filed in the company's name, each related to water purification and bioremediation. Every one of them bore my initial sum in the margins of early drafts. He'd archived our conversation's journal pages, even the failed college thesis I'd cried over on his couch. There was a letter at the bottom, typed and notarized, addressed to Mr. Elias Roden. I recognized his law firm's letterhead instantly. My hands gripped the page tighter as I read "to be opened" only after the reading of the formal estate. A supplemental will session is required at the cabin. All Hallberg family members must be present. Soraya Hallberg will host. Do not inform them of contents in advance. They must hear it from her. Arno H. Hallberg. I stared at the words for a long time. The idea of gathering them here on this ground they considered beneath them made my stomach turn. But I could already feel it. Grandpa had planned this to the letter. He didn't want me to inherit in silence. He wanted them to see. I slid the documents back into the folder and stood. The lab felt warmer now, like it had finally breathed me in. I climbed the ladder back into the cabin, my mind turning over every step of the plan. By the time I stepped onto the porch, I already had my phone in hand. My voice didn't shake as I left a message with Mr. Rowden's assistant. When I hung up, I didn't sit down. I started cleaning. Dust off the bookshelves, old mugs from the counter, a forgotten pair of pliers left on the window ledge. If they were coming here, they weren't going to look down on it. Not this time. They arrived in a sleek black SUV, the kind that looked absurd crawling up a dirt road. I watched from the side window as Regis climbed out first, brushing imagined dust from his lapel. Lysandra followed in suede boots entirely unsuited for the terrain. Melina trailed behind, sunglasses on, despite the clouded sky thumbs flying across her phone screen. I stayed hidden in the kitchen just beyond the archway. The kettle whistled softly on the stove behind me, a sound so domestic it felt surreal. I could hear them talking. "Well," Lysandra said with a brittle laugh, "at least it's got rustic charm." Regis grunted. "Can we get through this quickly? I've got a call with Zurich at 3. Melina didn't bother to pretend. "Why are we even here? This whole cabin thing is ridiculous." I stepped out. Their heads turned in unison. Melina's jaw dropped slightly, her sunglasses sliding down her nose. Regis's hand went straight to his watch, a nervous tick I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Lysandra narrowed her eyes. "What is she doing here?" She asked Mr. Rowden, who stood beside me. He didn't flinch. As stated in the instructions from Mr. Arno Hallberg, this second reading is to be conducted at this location with all family members present and in the presence of Ms. Soraya Hallberg. No one moved. I gestured calmly toward the sitting room. "Shall we?" They filed in with forced composure, like actors about to enter a bad scene they couldn't rewrite. Once they were seated, Mr. Rowden opened the folder. To begin, per Mr. Hallberg's instructions, the property known as Hallberg Cabin, along with all structures, facilities, and subterranean assets contained therein, is transferred in full to Ms. Soraya Hallberg. Regis shifted. Lysandra's lips tightened. In addition, Mr. Rowden continued all legal shares and rights to Hallberg Bioremedy LLC are vested solely in Ms. Soraya Hallberg as outlined in the Articles of Inception. Melina lowered her phone slowly, her mouth now firmly shut. And finally he said, turning a page, all remaining assets within the Hallberg Trust, not previously distributed, were reinvested into Hallberg Bioremedy LLC by Mr. Hallberg before his passing, placing full control under Ms. Hallberg's direction. I didn't look at them. I just sat back in the armchair across from them, folded my hands, and waited. Mr. Rowden cleared his throat again, this time with something more than professionalism in his voice. He reached for a separate envelope from his briefcase, thin-creased, handwritten. "This is a personal letter from Mr. Hallberg," he said, "requested to be read aloud in this room with the family present." I sat straighter, hands clasped tightly in my lap. He unfolded the letter slowly, revealing Grandpa's bold penmanship. As he began to read, the room exhaled. "To my dearest Soraya. If you are hearing this, then I am no longer beside you, but my belief in you remains fierce as ever. You glowed in ways they never tried to understand. You asked why when others just nodded. I watched them try to clip your wings with silence and disinterest. I watched you fly anyway. This company isn't revenge, it's reclamation. It's yours not because they failed, but because you never did." The words struck deep, pulling at something buried under years of controlled quiet. I kept my face still even as the air shifted around me. Melina was the first to break. "She disappeared for years," she snapped. "Now suddenly she gets the company, the trust, everything." My voice rose before I could stop it. "I didn't disappear. You changed my number." Regis stiffened. Lysandra looked away. "You told everyone I was unreachable, that I didn't care, that I skipped the funeral." "I called," I said. "I came to the house." "You weren't there. You told the neighbors I moved abroad." "You missed Grandma's memorial," Melina said sharply. "I wasn't told the date," I answered flat. "I showed up at the church at noon. It had ended at 9. Mr. Rowden stayed silent, letting the storm settle in its own time. I met their eyes, each of them. I could see the cracks forming. Not guilt, not yet, but confusion. Guilt needs truth first, and now they had it. Grandpa had seen all of it. Every cut, every slight, every polite exclusion. And instead of asking them to love me, he'd built something stronger. He gave me a kingdom of my own and locked the gates behind me. The city greeted me with its usual noise and urgency, but something in my chest still echoed with the quiet of the cabin. I tried to hold on to that calm as I settled back into my apartment, but it didn't last. The email came late that night. Subject: urgent Hallberg Bioremedy, flagged for ownership review. A regional patent board had received a challenge to the company's filings. Someone was alleging the transfer of assets was coerced. The attached documents were from Melina's attorneys. The claim that I had influenced an aging man's estate decisions for personal gain. I felt the heat rush to my face. My fingers hovered over my phone before I remembered who I needed to call. Rowden picked up on the second ring. "She's saying I manipulated him." I said, breath tight. He exhaled, calm. "Let them say it." All of Arno's transfers were made years before his first hospitalization. Dated, witnessed, clean. I still didn't feel steady. But she's stalling. "That freezes everything, doesn't it?" "It delays," he said gently. "It doesn't undo." The next day, it got worse. I learned Regis had contacted the company's financial partners. One of them, the same firm Grandpa used to secure the startup seed capital, was now withholding disbursement, citing the unresolved family dispute. I hadn't even caught my breath when Melina called. "You okay?" She asked, her voice falsely warm. "What do you want?" I was thinking. She paused just long enough to make it sound spontaneous. "Maybe we can co-manage this. I mean, I've got reach. You've got your lab stuff. We'd be unstoppable." I even drafted a potential brand name, Halberg Earth. I laughed once short and humorless. This isn't a show, Melina. It's science. And I'm not handing over the work Grandpa trusted me with because you're good at hashtags. She went quiet, then sighed. It was worth a try. When I hung up, I didn't feel proud, just exhausted. The truth had been spoken, but now I was learning that truth alone doesn't protect you. That night, I reopened the lab documents, reviewing every line. And in the corner of one scanned memo just above Grandpa's signature, I saw something that made me stop. A name, a company, a date. And suddenly, I knew exactly where to look next. The arbitration was held in a glass conference room, quiet but tense. A mediator, 2 patent officers, a couple of Halberg Bioremedy board members. I sat on one side of the table, my binder full of facts, but my nerves tight. Across from me, Melina whispered with her lawyer, flipping papers with theatrical calm. Regis and Lysandra weren't there, but I could feel their fingerprints all over the legal strategy. Then the door opened. Vanessa walked in. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. She wasn't expected, but she entered with a steady step and a brown folder tucked to her chest. "I have something to submit," she said to the mediator. "And you are an independent witness and family." She placed the folder on the table and left it open. The first page was an email from Lysandra. "Let's redirect Soraya's grant mail." I don't want her seeing it until Melina can respond first. Next, a printed transcript from a voice memo. Regis's voice. "If she doesn't see the email, it doesn't count. Move on." Finally, a scanned note in Grandpa's handwriting. "Do not trust them with Soso's files. She doesn't know it yet, but she'll build something they'll never understand." Melina's hands trembled. Her voice caught in her throat, but she said nothing. Vanessa turned to me briefly, her voice even. "I didn't bring this to destroy them," she said, "just to stop lying." Then she left. No speech, no tears, no apology, just proof. The room changed. Even Melina shrank a little in her seat. The mediator flipped through the documents silently. The board members exchanged glances. It wasn't over, but for the first time since Grandpa passed, the weight shifted back to truth. The ruling came in an email stamped confidential, but it felt loud. Uncontested control. Every patent, every asset, every share. Mine. There was no press release, no courtroom scene. Just a quiet end to the noise they'd created around me. For the first time, the company wasn't in dispute. It was in motion. 2 days later, the offer arrived. $40 million in early-stage investment, a sprawling campus, international partnerships, all tied up in a sleek proposal from a green energy conglomerate known more for optics than impact. They wanted co-branding, Halberg Earth, a new image, and one condition buried on page 6, Regis and Lysandra reinstated as honorary founders. I read that line 3 times. Rowden called me that evening. Legally, it's yours to reject. But financially, I know what it would mean, I said quietly. But I also know what it would cost. They scheduled a joint press event at a luxury conference center in Midtown. I walked onto the stage in a charcoal suit, Grandpa's old field watch tucked under my sleeve. The podium gleamed. The cameras were ready. A man from the conglomerate stood to my right, smiling too wide. When it was my turn, I stepped forward and adjusted the mic. This company I began wasn't built to get me invited to rooms like this. It wasn't built for applause. I paused. It was built to repair silence, to give voice to the things people overlook, discard, or erase. Behind me, someone shifted uncomfortably. "I'm grateful for the interest," I said, "but we will not be accepting the offer. Halberg Bioremedy will remain independently led, community-rooted, and intact." Gasps, a few murmurs, a camera flash. I didn't wait for applause. I stepped down, nodded once, and walked off stage. Outside, the wind hit my face like clarity. My chest was steady. I thought of the map Grandpa had left me, the one with no treasure, just a direction. I had followed it here, and I wasn't done yet. 2 years passed in the rhythm of real work, the kind that doesn't ask for headlines, only results. Halberg Bioremedy had become a quiet force. Our water detoxification system, once a prototype buried under a cabin floor, was now installed in 12 counties, with interest from 3 continents. We didn't advertise. Our results traveled faster than any campaign. But the part that mattered most to me didn't live in patent offices or polished boardrooms. It lived in classrooms, in the eyes of kids, who reminded me of me. We launched the Quiet Spark initiative the year after arbitration, a STEM pipeline for rural students, many of them first-generation underfunded, underestimated. We gave scholarships to what I called undervalued thinkers, those who solved differently, asked inconvenient questions, or simply didn't raise their hands loud enough to be noticed. We built labs where they could break things and start over, where they didn't have to be perfect, just persistent. And Melina showed up. Not for me, not at first. I think she came for herself when the spotlight finally dimmed and there was no stage left to stand on. She didn't say sorry, not with words, but she unpacked microscopes every Saturday. She guided shy kids through science fairs. She sat in the back row during presentations and whispered, "Project your voice. You've earned it." I watched a girl named Ariella, barely 12, stand in front of the mayor last spring and explain how her DIY nitrate sensor worked. Melina stood behind her cue cards in hand, smiling like she'd always known she could do it. We weren't sisters again, not in the way people expect. Too much had cracked open between us. But we were something else now. She never touched a single document, never asked for credit or access. She just helped. And every now and then, when the work slowed and the kids were gone, she'd look over and say, "He would have loved this, you know?" And I'd nod. Because he would have. In my office, above the bookshelves and beside the humming filter systems, hangs the map. Grandpa's map. Drawn on yellowing graph paper, creased and ink-stained, it's framed in walnut wood. The paths through the trees. The cabin barely a sketch. The X not marked in gold, but in graphite beside a note. Check under the microscope. Below the frame is a small brass plaque. I had it made the month the new wing opened. It reads, "You don't need permission. You already began." I read it often. Not for affirmation, but for grounding. Because I forget sometimes what it took to get here. Not the lawsuits or the headlines, but the silence, the invisibility, the steady erosion of self. My parents moved to Florida last spring, a retirement condo on the coast. HOA meetings imported lemons for their tea. Occasionally their names surface in business digests, quiet resignations from foundations or minor board roles. Nothing that echoes, nothing that cuts. I don't miss them. Tonight, like most nights, I walk the annex before locking up. The dusk light spills through the glass corridors, soft and gold. I pass the bioreactors in the testing lab, then the classrooms where tomorrow someone will present a prototype made from kitchen scraps. Past the student gardens, hydroponic beds glowing with life, and the mural Ariella painted with the others, a swirl of stars, turning into neurons, into roots, into light. The wind rustles outside, brushing through the trees that guard this place like sentinels. I stop for a moment, hand resting on the cool steel rail of the walkway. This place, the sound of it, the pulse of it, it's not about power or proof. It's about presence. It's what love sounds like when no one's trying to earn it anymore. Not conditional, not performative, just here. I used to think legacy was about nameplates, portraits, something someone would someday remember. But now I know. Legacy isn't about who remembers your name. It's about what you leave behind that finally lets someone speak their own, their